Book 2, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for a review. And I am reviewing the King Raven trilogy by Stephen R. Lawhead. I know I did a review recently on All the Colors of the Dark, but I'm doing this one because I literally just finished the trilogy. And I feel like I do agree that with, I think it was Daniel Green who talked about it, how sometimes when it comes to series, you almost want to wait until you finish reading the series before you review. Because it's hard to review each individual. I mean, unless it's like a series, like a lot of romance books, for instance, romance book series are often, each story is its own story. And you don't have to read the next book. You don't have to read the books in order. And then, of course, a lot of times, the only thing that they'll do is that they'll reference characters from previous books. So yeah, I wanted to wait until I finished the whole trilogy, and I just finished it today, and review it. So, this is a Robin Hood retelling, but the biggest difference being that it is told during a different time era, instead of the time when, King John took over while his brother Richard was on his crusades. And it's, I think they were still, these peasants, this group of people were still part of the English, we're still English, we're still Britons, but William was not not William, King John sucked. He was not a very good, not that, from what I read in the Plantagenets by Dan Jones, Richard the Lionheart was not a saint either, but I think, John was downright hated. He was one of those people who exterminated the Jews, wanted to get rid of them. He did a lot of shitty things. But this one, it takes place when when the Normans invaded Wales. So we are with William Rufus, aka William the Red, is our big looming shadow of an antagonist. And I say shadow because he doesn't appear, he appears in one or two chapters in this book, Scarlet, the second one. He doesn't even appear in Hood, the first book, but he plays a lot bigger of a role in Tuck. I guess he appears twice in this book. He comes near the end of the book and in the middle of it. So it basically follows the same beats of Robin Hood. This tyrant king is running the country, and, you have the Robin Hood character wants to, becomes a hero and leads a band of merry men, and they're living in the forest. They're hiding out in the forest because all their homes have been taken from them. But in this case, we kind of start at the very beginning. All the versions of Robin Hood I've seen, well, no, that's not entirely true, because we do have, in some versions, Robin has come back from the Crusades. He was with King Richard during the Crusades, and he has come back. He has come home, and he still loses everything. Like I said, follows the same beats, where in Hood, Robin, our character his name is Bran. I cannot say his surname or whatever, but, he loses everything because his father, his father lets the Norman invaders, the Frenic, I don't know if I'm saying it right. There is a pronunciation guide, but, in this, so, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the Welsh words. So, I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have trouble figuring out how to pronounce the words. So, but I still kind of have I would have to actually hear how they're pronounced, like not just read the pronunciations, but actually hear it. Like it really helps when my dad has traveled a lot into other countries, and so though and he helps me sometimes with some of the books that I've read from other countries. He's never been to Wales though, so he might not know how to pronounce these. But he's also really good at figuring out languages. He has an ear for it. Anyway, and actually, but there's no crusades in the story, obviously, but you have Bran is actually very even more reluctant hero. He doesn't see himself as a hero figure. He just wants to go into hiding and get out of there, and he doesn't think he's capable of beating the people who've taken his land, and it's that he runs it, and it's the Marion character. I'm just gonna say Marion because again I don't know how they would pronounce it, but Marion, she tries to convince him to stay because they are childhood friends, and she's the one who tries to get him to stay, but he's like, nope, I'm getting the hell out of here. I am not capable of beating these guys, so I may as well not even try. And he's also kind of angry that his father gave in and just was willing to submit. He's a very stubborn character. And it's not and he actually fakes his own death or lets people believe that he died, that he got killed. And he escapes into the forest, and which is not Sherwood Forest, but a different forest. I do not remember I'm just gonna say in the Greenwood. And he runs this old crone, this woman Herard, and Anger. I don't know, unless I actually hear them out loud. I'm not gonna know how to say the pronunciations. Who is the one who she takes him in because he has been injured, and she heals his wounds, and she's the one who sets him straight. She's the one who guides him through, and she's the one who tells him the legend of King Raven, which is this half man, half bird. And that's what he becomes. And she said basically he's telling him, this is what you have to become, this is who you are. And he's actually named after this figure in history, and this was the story he was told when he was a kid by his mother who died. So it is part of his childhood, and Engelhard is reminding him of it. And I love her character. I love when you have these older characters that are like they're at that, people assume because they're old, assume that they're weak, but they have all this wisdom and they have their own kind of strength, and they're often very funny. Like I love when you see the funny older character who just will smack you on the head if you're being dumb, or will kind of guide you in the right direction. They won't give you the answers, but they'll kind of nudge you, they'll guide you, they'll hint things. And I always find that dynamic between a younger character who's meant to be who's destined for greatness, and being guided by this older character who's not gonna take their shit, and is also gonna guide them and be a parental figure to them. I love that kind of dynamic. And of course Bran and Engelhard have that kind of dynamic, which is very, and like I said, it's very funny. So a lot of the reference, we get a lot of the culture of Wales from her. I mean, of course, from the people, Bran and his merry band. And I really like how this one starts from the beginning, where he's not just an eager beaver. He's learning, and he has to become the character of a legend, and it's not. And also, he has his flaws. He's stubborn. He's very angry. Has a lot of a temper. He's arrogant. He's a cocky young man. Thinks he knows what's best, and has to learn and grow. And I like seeing Bran's development, and I also really enjoyed his relationship with Marion. How it wasn't all lovey-dovey right away. They respect each other, and there is love between them, but it's not so easily hard-won. And she's also very flawed, and you definitely see more of her flaws in this book and in this one, More so in Tuck, because in this one she's not as much in the story, because this one, going, as you can tell by the title, it's from a different perspective, which I really enjoy that. I like how we meet the character of Will Scarlet. Now, I've only gotten a little bit of that. I've only know a little bit about that character, and I have heard that he possibly may be a combination of other characters in the original legend of two different people. Because there is some truth to the Robin Hood legend, from it sounds like, from when I've listened to podcasts on, Gone Evil. They did an episode on Robin Hood, and I think they hinted that Robin Hood might have been a real person, or just a representation of different types of people, or like at the time created someone who could stand up to the tyrant king and everything. In this case, King John. But I think people have said that Will Scarlet could actually be a combination of two different men. But I like how he's similar to Bran in that he's kind of immature, kind of cocky, but he's a little more easygoing and laid back. I mean, he still is angry and wants justice because his home was also taken from him too, like Bran. But Scarlet is a little more like, he's not as angry, or at least he doesn't show his anger as much. He's more willing to listen to other, although he's still a little, all these guys are all about, let's gung-ho, let's fight first, ask questions later. And that kind of comes into play in this book, with it being from the perspective of a man of God, of Tuck, he is a priest, he is and a monk. And Scarlet, but it also, this one has a more lighter tone to the story, because Scarlet comes off, or Scadlock actually, they call him Scadlock, but because, you have these people from France coming in, and they don't respect the Welsh and their culture and their language, and they're so dismissive, and, in fact, they're not impressed by the marshal and the sheriff, who we meet in this book, and then they play more of a part in Tuck. They are not, particularly the Marshal Guy of Gisborne, which the only time I've heard of that character is actually, well, now I think I've heard a little bit more in some of those history podcasts I've listened to, but I've heard the character, I haven't watched the series, but I've seen clips and stuff, because Richard Armitage plays the character. But in the Robin Hood series on BBC that came out years ago, he said that one had, I think, Richard Armitage, who, if you don't know who he is, he played in the Hobbit trilogy, the movie trilogy. Because I know the book is not actually a trilogy, but he plays Thorin Oakenshield, that actor. He played Guy of Gisborne, I think, in the Robin Hood series on BBC. So that was the only time I heard of the name Guy of Gisborne. Actually, in the new version of the Librarians, I think they mentioned the character too. They mentioned him too. Although apparently he's not. It is, I think, the librarian guide, corrects him and says it's Guy, not Guy. Like, the French pronunciation of it is Guy, I guess. I don't know if that's one. But anyway, he's very dismissive of their skills, of Bran and his men and their skills as archers. He doesn't think, oh, they can't beat me, our guys. And, of course, they kick their butts most times. Which, yeah, there's a lot of times throughout where you could make a case for it was a little too, there were too many times where they won almost every battle, and people might think, how's that possible? I mean, maybe it is possible. I mean, but there was also moments where they almost fail. They do fail, and characters do die. Characters on their side, they do lose one. They lose some people. But yeah, this one is definitely a lot more lighthearted. It's more fun because of, the character of Scarlet being the narrator. And he's like, there are a couple of the characters that, because he isn't exactly, I don't think he's 100% one of them, like as far as where he's from. Because there's a character, Sarlas, who doesn't trust Will in this book. That's part of Bran's band, and he does have to earn that guy's trust and respect. So, Scarlet does not get in easily, win them over, all of them over easily. He does have to prove himself to them. There is also, I was worried for a second there was going to be a love triangle. I mean, I'm not one of, again, I've said this before, I don't hate love triangles. I'm not as like, how dare they have a love triangle? I don't want a love triangle. I'm not going to even read this because it's a love triangle. I don't hate them that much. I'm okay with them. But sometimes it's nice when they don't have them. I appreciate when they don't have them. They don't resort to using that because I think that's an easy out to create drama. And I thought for a second they were going to have, because he acknowledges that Marion is really pretty and, oh, I like her and she's so sweet and everything. For a second I thought. But no, good news is they're friends. He just thinks she's pretty and, he respects her and he likes her well enough. But he does have his own love interest, which I really appreciate. And that was annoying. I don't know if that's right. And she's also a widower and a mother of a little girl. And I thought that story of their relationship was really sweet. They really cared about each other. And of course, they were in the middle of a war, essentially. So, of course, they fall in love really quickly. And I feel like, but it kind of makes sense in this situation. And then, I really thought his relationship with little Nina was really sweet. He jumped into the role very eagerly. Like, I think that was great, to see him become a father figure to this little girl. And I think in the fact that she was so young really helps, so they don't have to, because I think it would be unreal if she was an actual teenager and he was, she was readily accepted him as a father figure. I think that wouldn't have been unrealistic if she was a teenager. Like luckily she was not a teenager. So it made sense that she eagerly accepted him as her father. Yeah, that dynamic was really sweet. I really like that. And also this one, because, like I said, it's more lighthearted story, so there's more humor in this one, I feel like. And it kind of was a nice reprieve from the tension of this one, of Hood. But yeah, now you have Tuck is our third book, and this one is from the perspective of Friar Tuck. And I love Friar Tuck. He is such a great character. He's such a good, strong moral character. He is a man of God, so his first option is to, not to go to war, not violence. He wants to people to communicate and talk to each other and find a non-violent approach that doesn't involve a lot of death. And you gotta admire his character. But there are times when I'm like, I think he struggles to accept him and Marion both, because Marion is kind of on his side on the issue and is like, we should talk to our enemies first and maybe see if we can negotiate. Because I think they struggle to accept that at this point, I think talking might be out the window. There might be no hope. But is there? There might be hope. You never know. And, so there was frustrating moments where I was kind of siding with Bran and the others and be like, you really think that you're going to just talk to this guy? They have too much power. King William has way too much power, which like I said, he was in this one more, which I really appreciated it. And actually, as far as the antagonists go, some of the antagonists of the first book, were just okay, kind of predictable, hot temper, and you're like, no, it's mine, I want power, and you're annoying, that kind of, like, that villain that, I roll my eyes because they just felt so typical. But there were villains like Abbot Hugo, which I'm always intrigued by villains that are claimed to be men of the church. Because, it's kind of sad that they're supposed to be men of God, the good, moral people who, that they are pure or as pure as they can be. And yet, the Abbot Hugo is greedy and ambitious and has a temper, and he's selfish, and like he's almost more scary because it's the fact that he's supposed to be a man of God, and yet he commits all these sinful behaviors. So those kind of characters are really interesting to me as antagonists. And then there's also Baron Newthmarch. Again, I don't know how to say the name. Who I didn't know what to make of him, because first it's like, oh, he might be an ally because Bran, goes to him for help, and you think he's gonna help Bran, but then you're not so sure later. But then by this book, you think, oh, maybe he's not such a bad guy. Like, he's a very flip-flopping villain as far as, is he a threat to the Welsh? Maybe he is an ally to them, or, you don't know whose side he's on. And it's, at the end of the day, it's all for selfish reasons. He doesn't want to lose what's his. And he's deciding, he's one of those people that's like, I'm going to be on the winning side. Or I'm going to be on the side that benefits me. He's a very selfish character. But he was kind of, he wasn't the worst person in the world. He was actually a little bit more likable than some of our other antagonists. And I definitely was intrigued by him when he was introduced and what he was going to do and if he was going to be our friend or not. Friend or foe. And I still don't know if he's friend or foe. Most people probably say he's foe, but I think, there's some antagonists that if they're in situations like this, I think, if they're gonna help you, then you might want to gain their trust. And he was smart. Like, he was someone that, he made sure. And there were some antagonists in the story that were like him and were a lot smarter and be like, I want to make sure people trust me. These people trust me. I want to gain, if I'm going to rule over them, and then I got to be be nice to them, which I think is smart. And actually, in this book, he makes sure he forms an alliance through marriage, not his marriage, but his daughter's marriage, to Marion's brother, which does cause problems for Marion, because, she's all like, is interesting, because she also is like Tuck in a sense of non-violent approach, and maybe, oh, these people are allies, we should trust them. And Bran, who knows that Marion's father does not like him, and because he doesn't trust the Baron Newthmarch, he's like, no, but she doesn't listen. And like, at the time, I was like, he was right, because it did look like it backfired on her. It just seemed to go in that direction. And because her, Bran and his merrymen are still bad guys. Are seen as bad guys. And that they should just work with the Normans. I'm kind of curious how that worked out in actual history with the Norman invasion. I don't know a lot. I don't know about that history yet. But, I should see if there's any Dan Jones or any other historians written about that. I'm sure, obviously they probably have. In fact, one of the podcasters I listened to, the Gone Medieval podcast, one of the hosts does talk about the Norman invasion and all that, but there might be an episode that I have access to, because I'm not subscribed. I'm not a member of the channel, because you get to pay a fee for that, and I'm not willing to do that. So, I think she does talk about it, so I'd be curious to learn. So part of me does kind of want to learn that history, but I'll find other ways to learn it, like through books and stuff. But anyway, and also I think it's interesting that Lawhead chooses to make each book in the trilogy from a different perspective. like Hood introduces the story and everything, the situation. So it makes sense that it starts with Bran, and he's a reluctant hero, and he's being forced in this position. And meanwhile, then books 2 and then 3 is from different perspectives because he has embraced his call, and Bran has embraced his calling by book 1 and is part of it. So you can see the Tuck and Will Scarlet observing him and forming a bond with him. And now Tuck, of course, by this point is already established. Like, Scarlet joins the group in his book, while Tuck has been there for a long time, and he's already developed a friendship. Now, Tuck, I just really love him. He's admirable, but he's not far from sin. Like, he likes food, a good food and drink. He's described as a very rotund character. In the other versions I've seen of him, he is definitely that. But he's also very sweet, and he's also very wise. Like, people don't think he is, but he is. He has a lot of wisdom to offer, but he's also learning and growing as a person because he's still a young man. And he's also very clever. Like, he does help get them out of a lot of scrapes in this book, and he really helps them a lot and talks some sense into Bran. And he also cares about Bran. He, like, in a way, they're like brothers. He's like another brother to Bran. And I really liked about his character. He's just such a lovable character. I mean, all these characters are great. Scarlet is too, and Will Scarlet, and it's a fun interpretation, a retelling of the story. It's not that different. It explores a lot of the same themes, but from a different, with a different conflict, though, of, like, where you're in Wales instead of just England, in Wales versus the Normans, the Welsh versus the Norman situation. And also, like I said, there is a pronunciation guide in the book, so for those of you who are better at figuring out how to pronounce things, if you see it written down, Lawhead does include that, which I think really helps. And also having the songs in here, it includes songs in here. And there is actually in the back, I don't know if since this book is old, I don't know if you can still access it, but there's actually the author has an album, a music album for, so I think that is really cool because it really immerses you, and you can hear how the songs would be sung with the minstrels playing the guitar and everything. Or I cannot remember what their guitar like instrument is called, but I think that is really cool, and I really appreciate it, and it really immerses you in this world, is having some of the dialogue. So little bits of dialogue are in French and in Welsh. Like, particularly the scenes when the characters from the Normans and the Welsh are interacting and trying to, they speak in their own languages, which, oh my god, imagine living in a world where not everybody spoke the same language, not everyone spoke English, the struggle of that. Like, I mean, that's kind of what happened in Titanic. Like, no, not everybody spoke English, so, which is overwhelming, and, like, I was always bad at learning I was really bad at learning languages, even though I've said I want to learn Tagalog. But imagine that, being in that kind of environment, having to deal with that, and not being able to communicate, and not knowing if your enemy is threatening you or trying to make peace with you. But, so this was, and you also see, like, Bran he's clever, his cleverness and his skills at tricking people, and, like, he disguises himself a couple times. Like, in this one, he disguises himself as, I think, a Spaniard. And so that was really fun to see him outwit one of the Normans, one of the Frenics, to save a king from his own, which that's another thing the book does. In this book, we get to see more of their world because we get to meet the people that his cousins or his mother's family. We get to visit that kingdom. Although, I mean, it's not a huge difference between their own. But obviously there are differences. But it was really cool to go into another part of the world and explore another kingdom. Granted, we didn't get a lot of it because, of course, this is a very fast-paced story. A lot is happening. They're trying to get to one. They have a mission that they have to get these, and they have to at one point rescue the king of these people, and so we don't get to spend as much time there. But it was still I still really appreciate getting that brief glimpse of that other place. But anyway, I really enjoyed this trilogy. It was so much fun. And I actually kind of like it better than, the version of Robin Hood that I've read. Like, I think it was last year or the year before. Either 2024 or 2023, possibly, when I read it. A version of it, because there's other people's translated versions of it. I like the character. I like the idea of Robin Hood, the character, but like this made it a little more exciting and fun, and felt like, oh, the danger was real and everything, and while the other one was just it was the version of Robin Hood that I read was very episodic, and I don't necessarily, when it comes to episodic stuff, I don't like it in book form. I'm fine with it as a movie, as a TV show, but not as a book. I like a long, continuous story that isn't like you have this adventure and then it is resolved, and then you have another adventure and another adventure, and each one is resolved until the big epic conflict or whatever. And there is an epic battle, and there are more battles in Tuck, and I feel like there's more danger in the book Tuck throughout the whole book. Little moments of danger. I think it'd be really fun to see this adapted. I mean, I don't know if they would, because it is just a retelling, but I think, I don't know, because they've, instead of doing another Robin Hood movie adaptation, maybe they could do something like this instead, or make it like a TV show or something, like, instead of it being like another telling the original Robin Hood story being adapted, just do a different version of it. But, because I feel like this is different enough that it could still be entertaining. I mean, at least I think so. I don't know if other people would agree. But I really enjoyed this. This take on Robin Hood. And it's still, and I think if you like Robin Hood, you probably like this. If you like historical adventure stories with wars and stuff like that, because there's battle scenes, there's fight scenes and everything, and I don't know what else. I just enjoyed it myself personally. So anyway, that is King Raven by Stephen R. Lawhead. And it's 3 books, and they don't take that long to read. I mean, it was a little slow at first when I started it, but that's a lot of times that can happen when I start a book series, even if it's a short one. But I am happy to say I finished it. My another completed trilogy. Anyway, so I hope you liked my review and hearing my thoughts on King Raven Trilogy by Stephen R. Lawhead. I hope you consider reading it. I mean, unless it doesn't sound like your type of story, that's cool. But if you are vaguely interested, I'm hoping that you'll read it. You'll give this trilogy a shot. No pressure, of course. Just saying. But anyway, those are my thoughts, and I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye.